Welcome to another story made by Oracle One. In the sprawling suburb of Newbridge, nestled between sleepy streets and ordinary families, lived a boy named Finn. He was 12, with tousled brown hair, curious green eyes, and a mind that raced faster than anyone else in his class. Finn was an average kid by most standards. He went to school, loved books about space, and played video games obsessively. Yet, underneath that ordinary exterior lay a secret yearning to be extraordinary. One rainy Saturday morning, Finn's parents sent him to clean out the attic of their old house. Climbing the creaky wooden stairs, Finn was skeptical but indulged their request. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten time, filled with centuries of neglect and memories. Boxes lay scattered everywhere, brimming with yellowed newspapers, faded photographs, and old toys. As Finn sifted through the clutter, a metallic glint caught his eye, a small rectangular device with a handful of buttons, uneven and scratched, vaguely resembling a television remote. Curiosity lured him closer. The remote felt oddly heavy in his hand, cold and heavier than a typical remote. When he pressed a button, nothing happened. But then, on the floor near a beam of light, an old television flickered on. Startled, Finn realized the TV, which hadn't worked for years, had turned itself on, displaying a live feed of the attic. Except the image was of him. Finn's eyes widened. He touched the remote again. The image zoomed in closer on his face. He blinked, and the image blinked in sync. A shiver ran down his spine. The remote was showing his every move in real time. He waved his hand. The image mimicked him perfectly. Intrigued beyond belief, Finn pressed another button, a rewind icon. The screen showed a few seconds earlier, Finn standing where he had been moments before, brushing dust off a box. The remote was controlling what the TV displayed, or maybe vice versa. Experimenting further, Finn pressed a button marked play. Suddenly, he noticed something strange. The box he had just dusted off crashed to the floor behind him in the attic. A second later, the TV image showed him knocking the box over, though he hadn't done so yet in reality. Heart-pounding, Finn realized that whatever happened on the screen would manifest in real life, but only after first being demonstrated on the screen. He moved his hand sharply to the left on the remote's small joystick, and the screen showed a fast panning shot of the attic moving right. The real room followed, as if the remote controlled both the perspective and the reality itself. Testing his theory, Finn lifted a cardboard box on the screen, and seconds later, in real life, the box levitated slightly, inch by inch, then settled back down. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The remote could control real life, but only through the action of watching himself on screen first. In awe, Finn sat down to explore the possibilities. If he pressed pause, his image froze, and his body followed suit. Except his limbs were locked into place midair, suspended like a puppet. Granted, he was trapped until he hit play again. Every command the remote sent to the screen was a blueprint for his own real-world actions, almost like a split-second delayed puppeteer controlling his fate. But the more Finn experimented, the more he noticed a disturbing side effect. Every time he manipulated the remote, it caused a palpable strain. His body began to ache as though time was pulling against him. The minutes grew cruel, stretching longer in the physical world for every second he fast-forwarded or rewound on that TV screen. If he fast-forwarded 5 minutes, it was as if he had lived 5 years in that span. Mulling over the discovery, Finn grew cautious. He realized that the remote was a twisted kind of power. The more he controlled himself, the more it exhausted him in ways beyond normal fatigue. He needed to be careful. That afternoon, energized by this godlike device, Finn decided to test if he could use the remote to change other things around him. He thought about spilling his juice accident on the carpet and tried to reverse it by rewinding the event as shown on the screen. However, it only worked on himself. His own actions linked intrinsically to the screen broadcast, but objects and people not acting through him remained unaffected unless he physically interacted with them on screen first. With a grin, Finn concocted a plan to try it on his dog, the scruffy terrier named Patch who loved stealing socks. He reached out on the screen, picking up a sock in his lap and tossing it across the room. In real life, the sock flew. Patch barked joyfully but had no idea what caused his sock to suddenly appear in midair. Finn realized that by showing any action performed on the screen, including interactions with his surroundings, real life mimicked it carefully, but only if those interactions were linked directly to him. This was no ordinary remote, it was like a god's controller bound to his own image. Over the next few days, Finn's life transformed. He could fast forward through an awkward class, rewind his own mistakes, and even pause moments to freeze time just to catch his breath. At home, when he broke a dish, he replayed the moment backward on screen and restored it before anyone noticed. At school, he rewound moments of embarrassment back into silence. However, despite the wonders of this new control, Finn felt an eerie loneliness. He couldn't share the secret. The remote connected him to himself in an unbreakable loop. His own actions were the puppets, and he was both puppeteer and marionette. The sensation sometimes felt suffocating, as though he were no longer truly free but bound to the endless reflection on a screen. One evening, his curiosity drove him deeper. He asked a frightening question. What would happen if he controlled himself to do something he didn't want to do? He pressed play on the image showing his hand reaching towards the family computer to delete all his saved work, but in his mind, he didn't want to lose it. Yet, like a marionette, his hand obeyed on the screen, and in a cold shiver of reality, his hand reached out and pressed the delete key on the keyboard. Tears welled up in Finn's eyes. This was a power that consumed, not freed. The remote was both his weapon and his jailer. How deep did this control run? Was it truly his will, or was he captive to the reflections made real by the screen? He looked away from the TV screen and saw his face gazing back, lit eerily by the flickering image. The boy on screen looked tired, almost older, as if trapped by years of rewinding and fast-forwarding time. Finn pressed the pause button, and instantly, his body stiffened and froze too. The cold, paralyzing weight of control engulfed him. Using all the willpower he had, Finn jabbed the play button and collapsed back into movement. Chills ran through him like electricity. He realized this power was deeper than control. This remote manipulated not just space or time, but tied his essence into a loop from which there might be no escape unless he learned to master it completely. The next day, with renewed determination, Finn returned to the attic to find any clue about the remote's origin. He rifled through old boxes and found strange journals, filled with cryptic notes, diagrams of quantum states, and mentions of a project called Reflex. The writings detailed an experimental device designed to probe the boundaries between quantum mechanics and consciousness, using a recorded image of oneself as a control interface for quantum superposition, thereby altering reality as reflected by the self-image. Finn's remote was no toy but a fragment of a lost experiment created by a reclusive scientist who had vanished decades ago without a trace. The scientist's plan had been to build a machine that split the observer's consciousness and allowed one to manipulate actual reality via their recorded self. But the experiment had been abandoned because of its dangerous side effects. One's physical body aged rapidly when timelines were altered, and self-identity risked fracturing, trapped in endless recursive loops. Finn knew now that every rewind, fast-forward, or pause was not just changing time but fracturing his own being. He glanced at the TV showing his live image and resolved to end the endless loop before it devoured his soul. He concentrated hard and pressed rewind to the very moment the remote had first been found. The screen showed an earlier version of himself looking clueless but hopeful. Finn then pressed play, allowing himself to relive that moment with the knowledge and strength of the present. In the process, he put a mental lock on the remote's functions, limiting its rewind, pause, and fast-forward commands to protect his life. Through trial and error, Finn found balance, accepting the remote as part of himself but no longer letting it dictate his destiny. Instead of controlling every mundane event, he used the power sparingly for true emergencies and key moments where choice mattered. His life became a dance of will and reflection, a tightrope walk along the edges of reality. With the power to manipulate time and self-tethered, the remote no longer tormented him. It was a tool healed by intention, no longer a cage, but a gateway to understanding the strange connections between self and the universe. Finn kept the remote hidden but close, a daily reminder that control over time, events, and self came always with responsibility, cost, and the courage to let go. In the end, Finn's extraordinary secret reshaped not just his life but his very perception of free will and identity. Time was no longer just a river he drifted upon but a canvas to paint cautiously, with the brush of himself watching and being watched, forever intertwined. Every time he stood before the old television in the attic, watching that reflection of himself flicker softly on the screen, Finn smiled, knowing truth. That the greatest remote control of all was the one he held within his mind, tethered by his spirit, bound by no device but fueled by his will to live, learn, and become. For more stories, like and subscribe.